Welcome to Insights into Northeast Michigan, a WBKB News public affairs program. Insights deals with the issues affecting those within the community, as well as Northeast Michigan and the state. And now, Insights into Northeast Michigan.
Welcome to Insights. I'm Sherry Stewart. September is recognized as Suicide Prevention Awareness Month. This is a time where community organizations across the country mobilize to provide support and resources to prevent suicide. Organizers here in Alpena will be leading a suicide prevention walk later this month. Before we sit down to talk with one of the organizers of the walk, we'll be spending time with two women who have resources and their own personal story to share. Joining us to start the conversation today is Amy Morin. She is a psychotherapist and best-selling author. And actually, Amy, you call yourself an accidental author.
I do.
Well, thank you for spending time with us today, and we just want to jump right in. We know that this is certainly a tender topic to talk about, but it's certainly necessary. And tell us about how you became that accidental author, as you say.
So I was a psychotherapist and did what most therapists do. I saw people in my therapy office all day long, and then I went home and thought, okay, my job is to teach people about what I learned in college. And I thought, this is interesting. It's fun to learn about mental strength, to learn from the people that have come into my office. But I didn't realize how much I was going to need mental strength in my own life. And my mother passed away suddenly from a brain aneurysm pretty early on in my career. And it set me on a journey to study what makes some people mentally stronger than others. How come some people go through tough times and they bounce back and they actually become stronger, and other people get stuck and they just feel hopeless and helpless? And I wanted to know, what's the difference between those two people? So I really started studying people in my therapy office to learn firsthand. And I'm glad that I did, because it was 3 years to the day that my mother died, that my 26-year-old husband died of a heart attack. And I found myself grieving, for pretty much a whole decade, losing both my mother and my husband, and really wanted to know on a new level, all right, well, how do you stay mentally strong when you go through tough times? And wrote an article about what mentally strong people don't do. And that article went viral and it kicked off my career as an author. So now I get to write books and speak about mental strength. And I focus a lot on how to get rid of the bad habits that drain us of the mental strength that we need to be our best.
Such an impactful story. So Amy, tell me, in your studies and your experience, when we say mental strength, what is it that we should be looking for? Because as you say, sometimes people are able to get through those tough times in life and they carry on, but then there is another population, unfortunately, that they decide that, I can't do this anymore, and they do decide to end their lives, unfortunately. So what does mental strength look like? What should we be looking for in that?
Yeah, I'm glad that you asked, because there's a lot of misconceptions about what it means to be strong. Yeah. People think if you don't cry, if you don't get upset, if you don't have any emotions, somehow that means you're strong. But that's not the case at all. That it takes a lot more strength to experience sadness and to express tears, to cry in front of people. It takes incredible strength. And sometimes people will say, well, I can't be strong because I have depression or I have anxiety. Well, some of the strongest people I've ever met in life were battling those types of things. And it doesn't mean that they are mentally weak. It just means that they have some extra struggles. So I like to talk about mental strength and mental health in a similar way that we talk about physical strength and physical health. If you had a physical health problem like diabetes, you could still go to the gym and work out and build physical muscle. Mental strength and mental health is the same. It's all about the choices that you make every day. And if you're battling something like anxiety and depression, it's just an extra layer of difficulty, but you can still choose to say, I'm going to practice gratitude today. I'm going to choose to get out of bed. I'm going to choose to go through the motions of calling somebody, even though I don't feel like it. And for a lot of people, it's about reaching out for help. It takes strength to say, I'm not okay right now. I need to talk to somebody. It takes more strength to do that than to always pretend like you don't need anyone, or to pretend like you don't have emotions or aren't going through pain. So I think that's one of the biggest misconceptions, is people feel like they have to act tough all the time. But truth strength is about saying, no, I'm not okay, and I need to reach out to somebody and get some help.
And I like that you use the analogy of going to the gym to stay physically fit, but then we also need those mental exercises. Do you think in our society that we make it difficult for that? Because I know in some populations it's seen as a sign of weakness to actually admit that you need help, or you need to talk to somebody, you need another outlet. What are your thoughts on that?
Yeah, unfortunately, there is still a stigma associated with mental health and with getting help. We don't do that. If somebody goes to the doctor, nobody says you shouldn't take care of your body. Or if somebody goes to the dentist, we don't put them down for getting their teeth cleaned. But yet we feel like when it comes to our minds, it's a little different, that somehow we should always be able to pull ourselves out of it if we're going through a rough time, or that we shouldn't be bothered by anything. But seeing a therapist for your mind is probably even more important than seeing a doctor for your body or a dentist for your teeth. And if we can all just make that a little more normal, that there's nothing wrong with talking to somebody, there's nothing wrong with reaching out for help to make sure that mentally you're doing okay too.
And what are some of the signs and or resources that you can point people to if they have people in their family or people that they're close to where they're getting a little bit concerned? What are some of the signs and symptoms that we could be looking for?
So a lot of times when people are suicidal, they'll talk about death, they'll talk about wishing they could die. They may attempt suicide. They may sleep a lot more. You might see some pretty stark changes in their mood. People will often isolate themselves, but they'll often leave little clues too, where they'll talk about not wanting to be here anymore, or they might say that they feel like they're a burden now. Sometimes people go through specific events too that trigger thoughts of suicide, which it might be a job loss, it might be the loss of a relationship, or the economic crisis that's going on right now. We know with the pandemic, a lot of people are feeling lonelier than ever, and they're feeling kind of hopeless. But often they'll talk about it, or they'll at least drop some hints about it. And if you catch those things, it's important to pay attention.
And before we let you go today, Amy, and again, thank you so much for sharing that story, is there anything that you would like to leave us with?
Just that there's always hope, and that, suicide is a permanent solution to what's often a temporary problem. And it feels like such a dark place, and people feel like there's just no hope. But in talking to somebody, reaching out for help, even though it's scary, help is available, and treatment can usually cure and help people feel a lot better when they're depressed, anxious, or just going through tough times.
All right, thank you so much. We'll leave it there, Amy. Again, thank you so much for spending time with us today.
Thanks for having me.
Insights will return after these messages.
Welcome back to Insights. Joining us now to continue our conversation on suicide prevention and awareness is Becky Olson. And Becky has launched a website called Our Side of Suicide. And you have a very personal story to share, a very personal story about how this whole website came about. Do you mind starting and sharing that story with us?
Absolutely. I grew up in Southeast Wisconsin. I now live in Michigan, and grew up in what I would call a perfect household. I had a brother, parents who were still married for 30 years. We took, so many vacations as a family. Everything was wonderful. And one day, about 9 years ago, just 9 years ago this month, my dad went to work and he did not come home. He was a judge actively working on the bench at the time. It was a beautiful sunny morning, I remember, and all I know is the next morning I got back to my work desk and from a meeting, and I was flooded with a bunch of messages that said, "I'm so sorry for your loss," and I didn't know what that was about. Come to find out, my mom was actually on her way to my office to tell me in person that he took his life. And it was by complete surprise. And needless to say, I was stunned. And, what I found in my early days of surviving this suicide loss is that there's not a lot of resources out there. There are prevention resources that most people don't think to turn to until they have a loss, who actively thinks that anyone they know would do something like this. So I wanted to open up and share my story so that nobody feels alone in this very unique form of grief.
And I thank you, and we certainly applaud you, Becky, for sharing your story. And the grieving process is so complicated when it comes to suicide.
Absolutely. It's a very complex type of loss. If you think about going to a support group meeting for grief and loss where someone has died from any other type of accident or disease, most times those people are fighting to live. And there's this conception that people who take their life chose to pass, and so that's really hard, but they were fighting a disease of mental illness, depression, anxiety that truly left them feeling that there was no alternative. And so I truly believe that survivors of suicide loss specifically do tend to benefit from talking with others who've been in a very similar situation and understand.
And with that, tell me some of the resources about the website. We applaud you for starting this and having the strength to go on and to launch a website to help others. So tell me, what can people find on the website?
Absolutely. What we share periodically, we tend to share at least a couple times a month, if not weekly, are stories from real survivors of suicide loss. It's people who've lost a parent, a brother, a sister, an ex. A lot of times, that's another level of complicated grief, children. And so all of these survivors come, share their story, and talk about the life that has, that they've been left behind with. My loss was 9 years old this month, and I never would have thought that first month that I would still be talking about this so frequently this far out. It still feels like yesterday. So it just goes to show you how significant of a loss this is. And what I found is that if you're living in a rural area or somewhere where there's not a large metropolitan area of support groups, especially a support group specifically for suicide loss survivors, there's not many places to turn. So I wanted the website to be accessible by anyone from no matter where you live. We have people from all over the country and world who visit to read these survivor stories.
Rebecca, our first guest, Amy Morin, talked about having mental strength. So what are some of the things that you did mentally to help get you and your family through this to the other side so that you could share and help others maneuver this?
Absolutely. Two things I would say. So I've talked a bit about community, finding others and connecting with others who have been through this very specific type of loss. I've noticed that there's two types of survivors that I tend to meet: those who are very open, they want to talk about it, they want to share, and those who just want to be maybe quiet listeners who know that there are others out there to support them. And coming together, finding a support group was especially helpful. It's really difficult right now, especially in this time of social distancing, to make that connection. But for example, in Michigan, there are several support groups that you can tend to find, especially listed on the American Foundation for Suicide Prevention website. So finding that community, doing some reading. There are surprisingly several books on the bookshelf at the bookstore about suicide loss and that kind of grief. So reading about it, and then just talking about it, not trying to keep this bottled up. I know it's a complicated topic. If you mention to somebody, a neighbor, that your loved one died by suicide, they don't really know what to say. And it might make you think that you shouldn't say it at all because it makes somebody uncomfortable. But truly talking about it, opening up, sharing this grief load, I talk about it being a backpack that we kind of carry with us for the rest of our life with others, is certainly something that's helpful.
Very helpful information. Well, Becky, before we let you go today, is there anything else that you would like for us to know as this entire month? So there are events happening all across the country. In our own city in Alpena, in just another couple of weeks, we'll be having our own suicide prevention and awareness walk to bring us another feature, highlight to this very tender topic. Is there anything that you would like to leave us with before we let you go today?
Absolutely. So most survivors of suicide loss jump immediately into prevention. It's a great way to take action and feel like you are preventing anybody around you from experiencing this type of loss that sits with you for the rest of your life. But I would also say to be gentle with yourself and mindful that the word in and of itself, prevention, looking for signs, looking for tips, it might make some survivors feel, a sense of guilt that they missed the signs, that there was something that they could have done to prevent such an awful thing. And so to really realize that suicide loss, depression, these mental health elements are so complex that the actual death and passing is one piece of a complex puzzle, and it's a bit bigger than you. So you should absolutely do all the things you can do to help prevent, but don't let this month in particular, if you are a suicide loss survivor, bring you any sort of guilt. So know that I see you out there. If you are feeling something like that, try to put it aside. We talk about that in the most recent post on our blog, that there really was nothing more you could have done. Unfortunately, this is an awful thing that happens. Do as much as you can to prevent, but try to let that go if you have experienced it, and just find your community.
Very, very helpful information, and we'll leave it there. Thank you again, Becky, for spending the time with us today. We really appreciate you sharing that personal story and also leaving us with these helpful resources.
Thank you so much for having me.
Insights will return after these messages.
Welcome back to Insights. Joining us now is Darby Hinckley. She is on the committee of the Alpena Suicide Prevention Walk for this year. Darby, welcome to the show.
Thank you for having me.
And this is such a tender topic to talk about, but it is necessary.
Absolutely.
Yeah, especially during this time. And we know this entire month is Suicide Prevention and Awareness Month. And so in the city of Alpena, you again are on that committee. So tell us about how people can get involved, register. What do you anticipate happening that day?
Okay, so we have decided to start the Suicide Prevention Walk. They have these in various communities, and we realized that there wasn't one in Alpena, and we think it's a very important topic. Anyone who'd like to get involved, the registration fee is a donation of $20. That does include a t-shirt, suicide prevention t-shirt, and the rest of it would go toward any kind of suicide prevention in our community. Throughout the year, we're going to be doing different things, not just in September, because this is obviously something that is pertinent throughout the year. And if you want to get involved, you can pick up a registration form at either the Alpena News or at the Alpena Senior Citizen Center. And that would be the first step. To get more information, you can go to Alpena Suicide Prevention Walk on Facebook. And if you have any questions, you can go that route as well. I manage that page, and you can leave a message and I'll get right back with you.
Well, I'm sure the community is certainly grateful that you and the others that are helping you organize this to bring light to the topic. As we said, it's a tender subject. It is complicated, of course, and we know that the people are suffering with so many challenges nowadays, and you do have a couple of those stats that you can share with us about is this condition growing? What are we seeing here?
Well, the most recent statistic that we have, that's going to be from 2017. Right. So what we know is that this is especially a problem with the younger folks. This is actually, suicide is the second leading cause of death as of 2017 in ages 10 through 34. And that's a staggering statistic. We need to be aware that our young people are struggling. And I mean, everyone is struggling now that we've been going through the pandemic and job losses and just the uncertainty of everything. That's all coming together. So it's not just the younger folks, but the most important thing to do is to reach out and be able to just extend a listening ear. Sometimes you don't know what to say, but sometimes you don't have to say anything. Another statistic that I found striking is that there are more than twice as many suicides than homicides in the U.S., 47,000 as of 2017. And hopefully that number is not going to go up, but we all know that 2020 has been pretty crazy. And a lot of people have had mental health struggles, and some people that maybe never even had any issues with anxiety and depression, they have experienced that this year through all the uncertainties that we're dealing with. So this is something that we knew 2020 would be hard to sort of put together an event. However, we feel that this is the year to do it, and we will be having all the social distancing, recommending masks if you feel the need, and if you can't, distance the 6 feet, and there'll be hand sanitizer, and we'll abide by all those rules.
And as you say, being able to reach out into the community to have those resources, that's why this event is so important. As our two previous guests talked about, is that it's not showing weakness to reach out to get help and to let people know that you're struggling. Hey, I need to talk to somebody. So this event will hopefully help serve that purpose. And then certainly for those that are survivors that need to connect with community.
Absolutely, and we've been going over some of the sayings that we're going to have on signs along the walk.
Sure.
And one of them has to do just with what you just said. It doesn't show weakness to ask for help. It shows strength.
Right.
Because it is really hard, and a lot of times you're struggling with. We all have pride, and we don't want to admit that we need help. But once you make that step, you just feel this sense of peace in knowing that, oh, someone else cares about me, and I can go on as long as we connect with each other and show that we're there to help, and that we're there if the tables turn and we're the ones that need help.
Right.
Another thing that we are seeking is if any businesses want to sponsor or donate, we can include some of their logos in with our promotional materials and in the signs that are going to go along the walk, so they can reach out in that way too if you want to make a bigger impact with your business or something.
Absolutely. Well, we really appreciate that, believing that it will be a well-attended, well-supported event, because it's definitely needed to bring greater awareness and to provide that opportunity for community, for friends and family that may be survivors, may have had a loved one that unfortunately chose to end their life. So we thank you for that information, Darby. And so again, the walk is Saturday, September 26th. And what time will you kick off?
Okay, the registration is going to start at 9, and then the walk itself will be at 10 o'clock.
Okay.
And it is about a 2-mile walk. Just to let you know, it's not like a big marathon. It's, most people can comfortably walk 2 miles. And it'll just be kind of a casual event, and we just want to bring awareness to a topic that is a very important one all year long.
Absolutely. Well, we want to thank you again for spending this time with us, Darby, and for sharing that information today.
You're welcome. Thanks for having me.
Thank you. Well, that's it for this week's Insights. If you have a question, comment, or story idea, we'd love to hear from you. You can email us at news@wbkb11.com. I'm Sherry Stewart. Thank you again for watching.
Insights into Northeast Michigan is produced by WBKB News. This has been a production of Thunder Bay Broadcasting Corporation. All rights reserved.